to the Daily Racing Form Royal Ascot 2017 handicapping session presented by Naira Bets. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, with an esteemed panel that we're going to have with you over the course of this next 1 hour show. We have from the Daily Racing Form, one of our international correspondents, Marcus Hirsch. Marcus, how are you today?
I'm great, Pete. How are you?
I'm doing very well. We have freelance racing journalist Simon Rowlands. You can find him on Twitter at RowleyFileRRR. Simon, so glad you could join us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Peter.
Excellent. And we also have from NBC Sports, returning to the DRF.com airwaves, presenter and pundit, Nick Luck. Nick, how are you this morning?
Very well, thanks, Pete. Good to be back.
Excellent. I understand, Nick, you've got a bit of a crazy schedule, and we've only got you for the next 13 minutes or so. So I am going to dive right in to Tuesday at Royal Ascot. The meeting kicks off with what promises to be an absolute corker of a race in the Queen Anne. Nick, we'll start with your thoughts. Do you have any particular view of this race from a few days out? What are you looking forward to seeing in this year's Queen Anne?
Well, if you'll just excuse the police siren that's going past me at the moment, it's all about whether Ribchester can deliver the sort of performance he did when he dominated the Lockage Stakes at Newbury last time. If he can on slightly faster ground, then he's not going to be beaten. But it's not going to stop people trying. Kappa Racing, who run Lightning Spear, who's amongst his more significant rivals, are running a pacemaker. I assume they're going to try and set a strong pace to suit their horse. But I think that'll just suit Ribchester more because it will enable him to settle. He's a horse whose one Achilles heel is that he can be a little bit keen and free running. I think Lightning Spear's pacemaker needs to be slowing it down to get Ribchester pulling hard to get him beaten, not going faster to help it settle. So Ribchester should win. I think Graham Motion ought to run Miss Temple City in this race. I think she'd almost have a better chance here receiving the sex allowance than she would carrying a penalty in the Duke of Cambridge later in the week, if indeed she does carry a penalty. I think she does. So I think this will be a good spot for her, and I can see her finishing second or third if she ran.
That is
supposed to, yeah.
You go ahead.
No, I just was saying that's what Graham said the other day, that race, it seems like that's the race for her. That's what he's settled on as well.
Excellent. Yeah,
I think it's a good call.
He put the issue. There was a funny tweet yesterday where he was talking about how it was decision time, but that does seem a logical way to lean. Marcus, what are you hearing about how Miss Temple City's doing, and what's your view of the Queen Anne in general?
Well, I mean, the problem with her is she's twice tried to get a prep race in because he absolutely wanted to get a run before going over there. She was entered at Keeneland and didn't run, and then as a backup because it was too wet, and then as a backup plan, she was going to run in New York, and then the ground was not good for her again there. So he's had to, prep her at Fairhill straight away off a break for this race, which is a big ask. But I mean, it's something I think he's capable of doing. I don't think in a fair fight, I don't think she can beat an on-form Ribchester, but I do think that she can run very well in the race. I mean, she certainly has the benefit of having traveled there twice already, and if the conditions are, as they have been, and she gets really kind of fast ground, I think that really suits her well. I don't see why she couldn't fire fresh and run a big race. I mean, I certainly prefer her to the other American in the race, American Patriot.
A couple of fourth-place finishes, but very close-up fourth-place finishes where she outran her odds both times. Simon, what are you thinking about this year's Queen Anne? Is it just all about Ribchester, or do you give any of the longer shots a chance in here?
I very much agree with what Nick said earlier. Ribchester is clearly the best horse, but I think the disparity in the odds is too big, really. Last year, he had only a length to spare over Lightning Spear in a race in which Lightning Spear didn't really get going until very late in the day. So I don't think there's actually that much between Ribchester and Lightning Spear. There was a bit more at Newbury the other day, but that was a pretty odd race in which they got to halfway in a slower time than the handicappers did in a race later on the card. Ribchester ended up making the run in, and without saying he was flattered to win, I think things did end up going his way rather. I think both Lightning Spear and Mutak KF, if they run here rather than the Prince of Wales, have both got realistic chances of, at the very least, shaking up Ridgechester, who is a very short price. It was interesting what Marcus was saying about Miss Temple City and ground, etc. We're anticipating, last I looked at, there being pretty drying weather, and we're probably going to get pretty quick ground next week.
All right, let's move on to the King's Stand. It's one highlight after another on Tuesday, but Lady Aurelia sitting near the top of the market for this one. Marcus, we'll start with your assessment of what you know about Lady Aurelia and what's been going on with her, and your general thoughts on the King's Stand as well.
Well, I mean, this has been her target all year. You know, she got back into training, and this is the race that Wesley Ward was pointing her toward. And she got a race in at Keeneland. I thought she ran fabulously there. It was obviously a much lesser group. Those weren't even the very fast turf sprinters at 5.5 furlongs that we have in the state. That being said, I just thought she won so easily. And, to me, it was like it showed me all I wanted to see, that she'd made the transition from 2 to 3. I know she didn't finish her year last year, probably with as much a plume as people would have liked after her, breathtaking win in the Queen Mary. But I do still think while she's never going to be like a miler, and she's certainly not a horse that's going to be better at 5 than she was at early 3 or late 2, I do think she can be a good 3-year-old. And moreover, she's going to get the right kind of ground. And she's getting, she's getting 6 pounds from Marcia and 9 pounds from the older horses, and that's weight she doesn't even really need that much. I think she's got a really, really strong chance in the race.
Nick, what could we expect from Lady Aurelia here?
Well, anything like the Queen Mary run of last year, and she wins. I know this is a deeper group. It's older sprinters. We've got a bona fide Group 1 filly in there in Marcia, who carried a penalty last time when she won at Newmarket. But Lady Aurelia's got so much in her favour, as Marcus was saying. The horse who I think could run quite well is the horse who won the race a couple of years ago, Gold Dream, if he runs in this, because he loves fast ground. The faster the better. And if he'd broken on terms at Haydock last time, I think he'd have won the Temple Stakes. He's clearly in good heart. I could see him running well. But if the real Lady Aurelia shows up, and Wesley says she will, then she's going to be ever so hard to beat.
Simon, I believe you had an interesting idea in here of one to potentially upset the favorites.
Yeah, whilst I do concur with what Nick said about Lady Aurelia and Marcus, that what we saw this time last year was really something special. But Signs of Blessing, who's French trained, is a horse who's had not very much racing at the minimum trip, has often gone from the front and only just been overhauled, sometimes won at 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs. His return in the Prix de Saint-Georges at Deauville was the fastest course and distance time for over 3 years. And he gave £11 to his rivals that day, ran a really quick time. I think he's been undervalued by the public as a 5 furlong horse, and I've had a few dollars on him anti-post.
Excellent. Yeah, anti-post wagering, something that I think we have in a very limited degree here, but I'm sure a lot of USA racing fans' ears perking up at just that very notion of being able to bet these horses so far in advance at competitive prices. Let's talk about the St. James Palace. We were talking about the rendition 5 years ago before we went on air here. We'll start with you, Nick. What are you expecting to see in this year's running?
I'm hoping to see a real tussle between Churchill and the horse that he beat in the 2,000 guineas, Barney Roy. And Barney Roy's trip through the 2,000 guineas was so wretched that there are reasonable grounds to think that he could bridge the gap a little. Having said that, the way that Ryan Moore talks about Churchill, he's not a man known to waste too many words over horses he doesn't think much of, is quite striking. And I think he thinks that they're just not even anywhere near the bottom of the barrel with this horse. I just hope it's a great race between the two, and that Barney Roy gets a chance to show what he's capable of. Whether that's capable of beating Churchill, I just don't know, but that's what makes the race so intriguing. I suspect there ought to be as much, going back to Simon's point earlier about Ridgechester and Lightning Spear, I suspect there ought to be as much between Churchill and Barney Roy's price as there probably is, but I can't see the winner coming from outside that pair, that's for sure.
Simon, what's your view of this potential clash between Churchill and Barney Roy?
Well, it should be fascinating, and it was in the 2000 Guineas in Newmarket. In that race, Churchill had everything go right. No coincidence, the jockey made it happen. It was a fairly soft pace. He was well placed. He kicked for home. Barney Roy got into a bit of trouble. Churchill had the more benefit of experience that day. Barney Roy had run only twice before, and I think it showed. Given the difference in the odds, I'm going to be siding with Barney Roy. I think a track like Ascot, which is stiff and not as undulating as Newmarket, could really see him go forward another step.
Marcus, are you in a similar camp to Nick and Simon when it comes to this year's St. James Palace?
Definitely, Simon. I'm siding with Barney Roy, and to pick up on what Simon was just saying about the track, I really thought the undulations are what did the horse in, Barney Roy, in the 2000 Guineas. It looked to me like he was slightly unbalanced almost the entire way, which is what led to his taking a bad step at such a key moment. And I really liked the way that he finished the last 50 yards, and he galloped out in front, very lightly raced. He looks like a horse that will appreciate, fast ground to me and a flatter track. And just off that one race, I mean, he probably would have more room to improve than Churchill. I think he's got a great chance of winning.
Excellent. All right. I want to take a couple of minutes break here and just isolate Nick for a moment, since we have to let him get out of here in a couple of minutes, and just say generally for beyond Tuesday, Nick, are there any particular highlights you're looking forward to, either in terms of the sport or specifically horses you might be looking to wager on through the rest of the Royal Ascot meeting?
I'd be disappointed, Pete, if Mirage Dancer couldn't win the Tercentenary Stakes, the Group 3 later in the week. It's a race that was won by our old friend Time Test a few years ago, and he looked very good when he won it in the same colours, Mirage Dancer, to Michael Stout. I'd be disappointed if he couldn't win. He's quite an exciting horse. He ran very well in the D Stakes at Chester. It's a good idea not to go for the Derby, I think, with him. The same trainer runs a nice horse. He also missed the Derby with, called Crystal Ocean, who was third in the Dante at York. He ran a really nice race that day, and I think he's got a good chance of winning the King Edward VII. And I think the market's all wrong in the Prince of Waleses on Wednesday. I think Highland Reel should be favourite, and he's 5-1. I guess people are assuming he may go for the Hardwick. I don't think he will. I think he'll run in the Prince of Waleses. And for all I respect you this season, his potential to improve, he hasn't done it yet at Group 1 level. And Jack Hobbs is a horse who I think will be compromised by 10 furlongs on very firm ground. So I think 5-1 is the wrong price of that Highland Reel in that race.
All right, we'll be getting to that in a second, Nick. But first, I'm going to go ahead and let you jump off and get to your other responsibilities. Hopefully, we'll have another chance to catch up soon. And I appreciate you carving some time out of your day to join us here on the Naira Bets Royal Ascot Handicapping Preview Show.
Not at all. Thanks a lot, Pete. Take care.
Speaking of our sponsor, Naira Bets, I want to tell everybody about the sign-up bonus they have currently going on. You can get into the action by opening a Naira Bets wagering account, bet on great racing at hundreds of tracks from anywhere at any time. Naira Bets is available from coast to coast. To sign up for free, simply go to NairaBets.com and click on the blue sign up button at the top of your screen. With Naira Bets, you'll be able to earn cash rebates with a generous rewards program and participate in exclusive wagering promotions. Or is there a chance that he'll contest the Hardwick again on, I guess that's Saturday, a race that he contested last year? Marcus, what are you hearing about the plan for Highland Reel?
Nothing. You're going to have to go to Simon for this one. My ears are tuned to different grounds in the world than
That's
that.
Fair. That's absolutely fair. Simon, what's the latest you're hearing about Highland Reel, and what would you think of his chances should he appear in the Prince of Wales on Wednesday?
I'm also hearing nothing. You're going to have to go to Marcus for that. No.
Well, just
it needs to be seen. Aidan O'Brien is notorious for playing his cards not only close to his chest, but as late as possible. Can't say I blame him. For me, Highland Reel more recently has been a horse who's been at his best forcing pace at 1.5 miles. When he won the Coronation Cup at Epsom the other day, he actually ran really quickly in the first 2/3 of the race and sectionally, and that ran the finish out of his rivals we've seen him do that elsewhere as well. I think he would be a little bit vulnerable at 1.25 miles on good firm ground. I also concur with Nick, again, that Jack Hobbs might be a little bit vulnerable there, but I disagree with him on his assessment of Ulysses, who I think could be one of the stars of the season. He won a Group 3 at Sandown on his reappearance, which doesn't read all that brilliantly. He beat Deauville by length, but he showed a rare turn of foot that day in what was a steadily run race. And Ulysses, trained by Sir Michael Stout, is just the kind of horse his trainer does really well with. And I think we could see a really good performance from him. And I think he'll be more suited by the conditions than the other two we've mentioned.
He was a very interesting runner in last year's running of the Breeders' Cup Turf, ended up fourth in there and seemed poised to have a much better season this year. I will admit, and I know it's several days out and we'll have to see what happens in the market. It did surprise me to see his anti-post odds as low as those of Jack Hobbs and lower
same
than
price.
Yeah. What what do you make of that, Marcus? Is this and what do you think?
He's just a live horse, I think. I mean, when he was sent to Santa Anita for that race, to me it said me. I mean, I didn't think he was ready to win that race, but what it suggested is that there were very high hopes for this season, and they wanted to get him started on the path where he could, get a chance to be that kind of horse. And he just seemed like a later developing sort that could really run a big race. I mean, as far as Jack Hobbs goes, I will point out that he did wear blinkers for the first time last out in Dubai, and that might have really made a difference in his horse. He probably did appreciate the way the course came up that night with all the rain they got more than some of the others, but I'm not sure that he's entirely ground dependent. But yeah, I mean, if you get beyond the first three, I can't see a lot that jumps out at me. It's probably going to be one of those three horses unless they all falter for some reason that's unforeseen.
Simon, I wanted to ask your opinion specifically of Queen's Trust, who I know who's been pretty impressive on the clock at times, certainly has performances when looking at the clock that have been better than meets the eye on at least one occasion. Do you give her any chance against a group this tough?
A bit of a chance, but no more than that, and she's likely to be at double-figure odds. I thought she got an absolute genius ride from Frankie Dettori in the Breeders' Cup Fillies mares. That's probably about as good as she is, and I think the boys that she's up against here are a couple of lengths better than that. But she's not out of it by any means, but I think the stable have got an even better prospect in Ulysses, who's very likely, given the stable's ability to handle horses like this, to be even better this year.
While we're talking Wednesday, let's talk about the Queen Mary. We've got a very live-looking, especially according to the anti-post market, USA Raider in Happy Like a Fool. Marcus, what's the story with this horse as far as you know?
Well, I mean, she's being talked up a lot. Wesley was talking her up a lot when I spoke to him a few weeks ago, even. And I mean, I think she's a good chance in the race, but she wouldn't, to me, rate anything like a Lady Aurelia or something like that. I mean, she won decently first time out, but she, it didn't blow me away. She ran fast, not that fast. The whole thing with her is the assumption is she's going to be better on grass. I mean, that's what he thinks. She's been sold. It was his horse. He bred the horse. He sold the horse. So, I mean, there's an incentive to say that she's really good. I'm not saying that he's lying. I'm just saying that I don't get the sense that she's automatically superior. In fact, I mean, he has another horse, Fairyland, who may be in that race, may not. It hasn't been decided yet. I was just as taken, really, with her first race as Happy Like a Fool, and she's going to be a much higher price. She's obviously got a pedigree that would slant heavily towards grass, and I just thought her action looked a little bit like that as well. So I wouldn't be itching to play Happy Like a Fool as short as she appears to be in that race.
Going to take a general question, and I'll direct this one to Simon, before we get into your specific thoughts on the Queen Mary, as somebody who's been following English racing for quite a while, what do you make of all the success that Wesley Ward has had specifically at this meeting over the last few years, and how do you factor the Ward? How do you include the Ward factor, I'll say, in your overall form study?
With some difficulty, it's got to be said, on the other side of the Atlantic, but I think it's been great for the Royal Meeting, which has always been a milestone in the racing calendar, but has become increasingly international. And, you know, it's really benefited and will do this year in particular with such a strong raiding party from abroad. We keep an eye on certainly the high-level American form, but with the 2-year-olds coming to races which are easier to win, races like the Queen Mary, obviously, than some of the big ones, you're just going on wide margin maiden winners quite often, and we trust in Wesley to bring across something that is doing the job, and he has managed to do that a few times. I would say that I think this year's Queen Mary, it's early days of these 2-year-olds, but there doesn't appear to be an awful lot up against Happy Like a Fool.
You did have one alternative to suggest, as I recall.
Yeah, it's run a couple of times, got beaten in its debut, albeit narrowly, a horse called Out of the Flames. We have Breeze Up Sales here. That's something which I believe we acquired from America quite a while back. And more recently, although there are no official timing, people like me go along and time them. And Out of the Flames is a really quick breezer. Debuted at Ascot, got just touched off, and then won pretty well at Windsor. She's going to be quite a big price, and I think she's got a pretty decent chance of running into a place. But if Happy Like a Fool is anywhere near Lady Aurelia, or even half a dozen lengths behind her, I think it's going to take quite a lot of beating.
Before we move on, you go ahead.
I'd say she's a half dozen. I'd say she's within a half dozen lengths. And you know, another good thing about her is she didn't change leads. So European horses don't do that a lot of the time. So she's got that down and doesn't need to going down the straightaway. I just wanted to make the point about these Ward horses. If you watch all their races, they're like robots. Every one of them debuts in blinkers. Every one of them has speed. And every one of them, you know, is either on the lead or right off it and finishes decently. And you know he's looking for horses for this meet in particular. So, I mean, I agree that in Wesley we trust to a great extent because he has figured out which horses suit this. And, I mean, these horses are all very well along, you know, in their development for this time of year. They've worked a lot down in Florida over the winter. They've worked on turf a lot. And they're fairly professional for their age.
Absolutely, that's undeniable. The program that they're put through gives them, it seems, a competitive advantage, at least to some degree, in the capable hands of Wesley Ward. Before we move on from Wednesday, I know, Simon, you had a strong view in another race on the day. I wanted to give you a chance to express that before we turn the page to Thursday.
Yeah, one of the bets I've had already, the Jersey Stakes, which opens the card on Wednesday. Looks like being a cracking race with horses who went fairly close in British 1000, British 2000, etc. But there's a horse in there who called Le Bravido. Andre Fabre trained, was just touched off in the French equivalent of the 2000 Guineas in what was a really good time. Not all French races are truly run. This one was. And Le Bravido briefly looked like he was going to win. I think a drop down to 7 furlongs from a mile will be no problem at all. And I think if he was trained nearer to home, he'd probably be about half the price he is. So I think he's about 5 or 6 to 1 when I last looked, and I think he's got a pretty good chance.
That's Le Bravido in the Jersey Stakes for Simon, trained by one of the masters, Andre Fabre. Let's go ahead and move along till Thursday. And we're going to talk about the Ribblesdale Stakes for starters. Marcus, have you had a chance to do much study in this one yet?
I'm out on the Ribblesdale. I defer to my superiors in this area.
Well, I know, Simon, you had an idea in this race as well. You'll be noticing through the webinar we've put up some daily racing form style PPs that I've been able to access from the archives. Unfortunately, not all horses are available, so I don't think we have any of the PPs from here. But Simon, perhaps you can just talk us through the form.
Yeah, it's quite interesting this year. There's an extra week between the Epsom Derby and Oaks and Royal Ascot. There's something to do with the positioning of the calendar, and as a result of which, you've got a few more horses going on from Epsom to Royal Ascot. The Ribblesdale could be a bit of a consolation race for the Oaks, where we had a brilliant winner, I think, in a really good time, Enable. She is still entered, but very unlikely to run. The 1,000 Guineas winner, Winter, is also entered, but far more likely to run elsewhere. And the third horse in the Ribblesdale, in the Oaks, Alluringly, I think has got a very major chance in the Ribblesdale. She's contesting favourite with a promising but less proven filly in Maury, who's a daughter of Frankel, out of Midday. Alluringly has got more convincing form. Prior to finishing third in the Oaks, she actually managed to run Enable to less than 2 lengths in the Cheshire Oaks, and didn't look at all flattered in that. Enable could be a horse who could end up even winning something like the Arc de Triomphe later this year. She really does look like being very good. And I don't think there was any disgrace for Alluringly to have been beaten a fair way in the Oaks at Epsom. She had behind her that day Horseplay in fourth and Coronet in fifth, and they're both in the Ribblesdale field. But I don't see any reason why they should turn the tables on Alluringly, who's another one that I've got involved with already. So fingers crossed on that one. Aidan O'Brien trained, and pretty confident she'll go close.
I should point out that these odds we're displaying on the screen, these were the best available anti-post odds as of yesterday. Some of these prices, this may have been one shop that was offering these, and the consensus price could be lower. There are various places online where you can look for those advanced prices, and obviously as we get closer to the days and we have a proper draw, you'll be able to access past performances. One website we definitely want to highlight for that, timeform.com, obviously the sort of parent company in some ways of Timeform US, with whom Daily Racing Form have a partnership. But timeform.com, a lot of great information on there, especially as we get closer to these races drawing. Marcus, any further thoughts on anything going on at Royal Ascot on Thursday, or shall we turn the page to Friday?
Well, we got a couple more Wesley Awards, I think. In Albany, at least one, Princess Peggy, and also Fairyland, I would guess, would run there if he really has a fool that much in the Queen Mary. And Fairyland's a shorter price. I would prefer her as well. Princess Peggy was supposed to run on grass at Belmont. It got rained off onto a very dead, sloppy track. She actually had less early speed than some of the award horses. She sat just off the pace and drew away late. But I was more impressed with Fairyland, who has got more of an obvious grass-leaning pedigree, who I think might be a little undervalued, compared to some of the horses that have gone there. And in Albany, I would definitely prefer her to the 2 wards in that race without knowing the overseas form intimately yet.
That's an interesting point about which ward horses are going to take money. It does seem very often that workouts play a huge role in the ward horses that end up getting hyped. But when you're looking at a horse who's been doing plenty of work on dirt, but has more of a turfy action, more of a turf pedigree, that does seem like a very interesting angle to maybe try and get a little bit of juice in the odds. Simon, what did you think about the Albany?
Well, while I think that some of the other 2 races are a little bit there for the taking, if there's a good one coming across from America, the likely favourite in the Albany, an Irish-trained filly called Alpha Centauri, is probably the best 2-year-old we've seen out so far. She's an absolutely massive filly. Looks like a 3-year-old. Got a really long stride. Took her a little bit of a while to hit top speed in both her races so far, and when she did, she was electric. I think Ascot's fairly stiff, 6 furlongs, and probably being ridden near the front should show it a good effect. So of all the 2-year-olds we've got over here, I think that's the one that Americans are going to have a really good one to beat. She's already up to the kind of usual winning standard of an Albany. So whilst I think she's, short enough, I certainly wouldn't put anybody off backing her. There's a lot of confidence behind her.
Very interesting, and certainly one to make it a point to check out physically next week, whether it's on your screen or if, like me, you're fortunate enough to hopefully get within spying distance of the walking ring over at Royal Ascot. Let's move on to the Commonwealth Cup. Actually, no, let's move on to the Coronation and talk about this race that's going to be happening on Friday. And Marcus, I'm going to start with you with a USA question. What are we hearing about how La Coronelle is doing, and do we think she's got a chance to hang against the best of these?
I think that she should fine, and I think she's maybe a little bit better than her bare form this year would suggest. I just don't see her as being exceptional in the way that Tepin was. And by that I mean she's going to have to run much better than she has and run against deeper competition on their home ground, who are more used to doing the sorts of things that she'll have to do in this race. She's 20-1, and if you wanted to take a hometown shot on at that price, I guess why not? But I don't see her being a major factor here. I don't know if I'm not that privy to everything that's going on in Ballydoyle, but I couldn't be more impressed with the way Winter has looked, and I thought she was even better last time than the time before. And having just blossomed really fully over the winter and into the spring, I don't see why she would be going backward now. It's obviously odds on, but I think she's going to take all kinds of beating, and there are probably several in between Winter and La Coronelle as far as the form goes.
Simon, is that your view as well? Is Winter going to take all the beating in this race?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything just said there. It was a bit of a surprise to me anyway, her winning at Newmarket, and Rhododendron got into a bit of trouble, and I did wonder whether Winter was quite as good as she'd appeared that day. Well, she looked even better at the Curragh. She really looked good. It's her race to lose, but as you may have been getting the impression, I tend not to back shorties. I don't think I'll be backing her at odds on. There is a filly who finished 4th to her at Newmarket, Tally Ebb, who had run only once previously, I think it was. They played a cagey game, didn't send her to the Oaks, pitching her up here instead. And whether Tally Ebb is good enough to win is questionable, but I think she'll take another step forward, and she could easily run into the first 3.
Folks betting on Naira Bets will have the opportunity to be playing exactas and trifectas. Maybe Tally Ebb one to mix in underneath to get a little bit of value. Marcus, any further thoughts on the Coronation?
No, sir.
All right, let's move on to the Commonwealth Cup. Simon, we're going to start with you because I know you had a strong fancy in here. Yeah,
this certainly from perhaps a more domestic point of view than an international point of view is almost the race of the meeting. Caravaggio was brilliant as a 2-year-old unbeaten sprinter. He had a setback this spring, but did come back and win a Group 3 at Naas the other day, but he wasn't beating very much that day. However, up against him, he's got a couple of really, really smart sprinters who've got really good times to their name, Harry Angel and Blue Point. They ran against each other at this course on their return, where Blue Point just about got the better of it, but Harry Angel was conceding weight and was a less experienced horse. Harry Angel since then has absolutely smashed the track record at Haydock in a Group 2, the Sandy Lane. highest time figure that Timeform has got in Europe this season. As an example of just how quickly he went that day, there was a Group 2 over the minimum distance, a furlong less, on the same card for older horses, and Harry Angel ran quicker average speed from start to finish than those top-notch sprinters. If you believe in times, and I do, you have to think that Harry Angel is a very good horse, possibly even a potential champion sprinter. The only problem is Caravaggio might be much the same. But I'm a Harry Angel fan. I think he's going to be one of the stars of the meeting and possibly of the season.
High praise and great data to back it up. Definitely one of the more exciting races of the week, even if it doesn't have the full North American participation. Though I guess, I mean, Lady Aurelia is still in the betting here. Marcus, you think there's any chance she turns up to this party?
I very much doubt it, but I'm not. I'm interested in the horse that we know is running for West Seaboard, Bound for Nowhere. I'm definitely not. Even despite the quality of the competition, we don't know how good this horse is, and I think he might be really good. And speaking of fast times, his time over the Keeneland course was the same on a different day as Lady Aurelia's in the 5.5 furlong stakes. He's only run twice, and his Turfway race over synthetics in his debut, I liked enough that I tipped him in the allowance race at Keeneland, and I was really, really impressed with the way he went there. Just the amount of speed he showed, and also the mid-race acceleration, and he won really easily. I think the 3/4 is going to be fine for him. And at something like 12-1 or so, I'm going to have a bet on him in this race.
I like it. Lots of strong views there. I'm going to take a moment now and just to let you know about the Naira Bets 10% Exacta winners bonus. You can use Naira Bets to bet Exactas throughout the Royal Ascot meet. And when you win, you'll receive a 10% winners bonus. That's right, a 10% winners bonus in every race of the Royal Ascot meet. How does it work? Well, let's say your winning Exacta pays $200. Naira Bets will add a $20 bonus on top of that. Wagers need to be made via mobile device to qualify. This promotion is available exclusively to Naira Bets customers. Visit nairabets.com to sign up today. Lots of opportunities to look for potential Exacta opportunities, and maybe using some of the UK markets as a guide to your tote betting. Marcus, I know you've paid close attention to this meet for a number of years. Is that a tool that you've used in the past to look for guidance in the commingled parimutuel markets, looking at the bookie prices?
Well, I definitely think that you can use it as a guide, and obviously there are some slants in the way that money is taken here. You know, that can give you some advantages. I mean, and even just I would recommend to people before, if they're interested in playing, I mean, just get on OddsChecker or whatever and look at all the prices, have a sense of what you should be expecting or looking for, and what you might want to be exploring, because it is a good baseline for sure.
Is that something you ever look at, Simon, as a punter over there? Are you ever looking at what's going on in the parimutuel markets, or do you find that there's just a lot more signal on the exchanges and through the bookies?
Much more the latter, but certainly anything to do with international racing, because you get commingled pools. They're really strong, and I'd imagine that the tote betting on Royal Ascot will be really strong, and it can be very reflective of opinions. So it's worth taking note of.
I've noticed a certain lack of efficiency in exactas and trifectas too. It doesn't seem like those pools get corrected quite as much. The try last year with Tepin was, to my mind, very much outsized. And that's another interesting idea for folks betting on Naira Bets to pay attention to. If you can get one price up into the number, whether you're talking exacta or trifecta, something you might want to take a look at. Before we move on to Saturday, do either of you have any other thoughts on Friday's card? Simon, we'll start with you.
Nick mentioned it earlier on, a race Crystal Ocean is in the King Edward VII Stakes, a horse he finished third in a Derby trial, the Dante Stakes at York, but missed the Derby. He's a worthy favourite for that, but there's also a French-trained horse, which I think may be slightly under the radar, in Recoletos, who finished third in the Prix du Jockey Club, which was another True to Run race, resulting in a good time last time. And if Recoletos pitches up in the King Edward VII Stakes, I think he's got a decent chance.
Nice. Any thoughts on Friday? Final thoughts on Friday for you, Marcus?
Nope.
Let's turn the page to Saturday. We're going to start off talking about the Diamond Jubilee. It looks like we'll have some USA participation here, potentially in the form of Long on Value. Is he still in the betting and being considered after outrunning odds? What's the story with him?
Yeah, he's there. He galloped yesterday, and he's running for sure.
Really outran the odds last time at Maidan. There's no odd listed in the USAPP we're showing, but on the betting exchanges, he was trading at north of 100-1 and must have given his backers quite a thrill and then quite a disappointment there at the end. What do we think?
Shocking. It's not shocking that he ran that well to me. I mean, this is a horse that had not been sprinting that long, and a lot of the U.S. sprints, over really fast ground at 5 or 5.5, that's just too sharp for him. He's not that kind of horse. A race run at a little more moderate pace and with a little more distance, like 6 furlongs, is really what he wants to do. Obviously, he handled the straight course. You don't know, how he'll handle faster ground, straight course. But I think he's I see him at 33 right now for this race. That's higher than I expected, although I wouldn't have any confidence that he would actually be able to win.
Simon, what do you think about the Diamond Jubilee?
Well, I'm very interested to hear those positive remarks about Long and Value. I definitely don't think he should be as big a price as 33-1. Generally speaking, our sprinters in Britain and France are a little bit much of a muchness. Lamato is probably a little bit better than that, but he was very good at times last season when he won the July Cup. On other occasions, he wasn't quite so good. He also travelled across to America, where a mile might have been just beyond him. He bombed out in Dubai in March. They blamed the ground, although he has actually got form on ground with a bit of give in it. He should have his conditions, but I don't think he's streets ahead of the others. Horses like the Tin Man, who probably will come on for his reappearance, where he was beaten at York. Magical Memory ran in that race and was second, and similarly ran as if he might improve. But they're kind of, none of them are exceptional, and certainly on my figures, I wouldn't have Long on Value all that far behind them. I think he's got a realistic shot in what is probably going to be a pretty big field and a pretty open race.
When you're looking at sectional times for sprinters in the UK, Simon, is there any difference in evaluating horses, any clues you can get from the sectionals about horses running a straight sprint as opposed to running a bend, whether it's horses running a sprint bend in the USA or on a polytrack surface, for example?
Yeah, I've done sectional pars, bi-furlong pars, and where you don't have much in the way of data, and because very little has been produced in Britain other than manually, I make an adjustment of, I can't remember exactly what it is, of just over a length for each furlong on a normal bend, a sweeping bend of 2 or 3 furlongs, so it slows them down a bit.
Yeah, I asked trying to get a clue of which USA horses we can maybe project to run just as well, if not better, when the turn is taken out of the equation. But it sounds like it's a bit of an ongoing process to try to evaluate that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I believe America has had sectionals of things like the Kentucky Derby going back into the 19th century, where in the 21st century and still having to do a lot of the working ourselves, I'm afraid. That could be...
It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It seems impossible that could be the case.
Well, I think the prevalent racing being so much on the grass where where the times, they're very meaningful, but it's not as straightforward because would you agree, Simon, it's less about final time and more about the relationship of the sectional times when you're trying to evaluate the overall quality of a turf race?
I would agree entirely. It's less about overall times, but that's exactly why knowing how overall times have been arrived at can tell you a lot about, not just about the horse's ability, but their stamina, the degree to which they may have been flattered by being well positioned or the opposite. And it does make it more complex because only about a third of races are truly run in Britain, according to time figures based on overall times. And you have to pick your way through the information and try and piece together exactly what happened. I would imagine an awful lot more are truly run, certainly on the dirt in America.
Explain that phrase. Explain that phrase for a second, Simon, and then I definitely want your thoughts on that, Marcus. But just for some of the more novice players listening, what does that mean, a truly run race?
A race in which once they get up to racing speed after, 100 yards or so, basically there aren't large inputs of speed or slowing down. It's fairly consistent pace given the topography of the track. If it's uphill, obviously it'll have a slightly different effect than if it was on the flat. So truly run races tend to result in overall times that reflect the abilities of the horses. And individually, there could be horses who've done well to finish strongly off the pace or have done the opposite. But truly run races tend to result in reliable form. Not many, less than half of races in Britain by the standards that we apply are truly run. So they're tactical and they need a lot of interpretation of the bare results. But rather than putting me off, that actually encourages me because I think it's a fascinating exercise and it's one that a lot of people don't have the time or inclination to do.
Marcus, you wanted to follow up on that?
Oh, no, I mean, I don't remember what I was going to say. Well, I think it was just related to the fact that in my time doing this, I feel like it's gone a different direction here. There are fewer truly run races on grass, at least, than there were in the past. I just feel like the incidence of everyone, snatching up, taking a big hold, and going really slow during, especially the middle portions of races, without riders being aggressive. That's kind of become an epidemic, and it makes it hard for interpretation. And then in this country, a lot of people are so reliant on final time speed figures, and that's obviously impossible to make accurately if you're talking about a race that's not truly run, because no matter how fast horses finish, they're not going to be able to clock a good final time. And I think that makes it difficult for figure makers and people trying to interpret figures to get a true sense of how things are actually coming about.
The accepted technique with USA Turf speed figures being to project a race that wasn't truly run, to put figures that make sense intellectually with what the horses usually run. In the UK, it's a little bit different. You do have a form figure, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, that will attempt to do what those projected USA Turf figures are doing, but you'll also have the opportunity, due to some of the pioneering work that you've done, to look at what's a little bit more equivalent to a raw speed figure, hopefully in the context of how slow they went early and how fast they went late.
Yeah, a lot of my work is based around taking overall times, which sometimes can be very illuminating, but just seeing to what degree the efficiency with which individual horses have run appear to have affected the final results, and upgrading the overall times of the horses as a result. It's difficult when you don't get many sectional times put on the plate, but I'm fortunate enough to be working in a profession where people occasionally paid me to look into these things and to not only take the data, but to come to conclusions about it as well. And my enjoyment of horse racing is exploded really as a result of understanding or trying to understand the complexity behind why results happen and why sometimes times are a good indication of ability and sometimes they need to be viewed in the context of the tactics and the sectionals that have unfolded. I think every race has got a really interesting story if you can dig deeply into it.
I think that's well put. Let's continue on with our discussion of Saturday closing day at the Royal Meeting. Let's talk a little bit about the Hardwicke Stakes. A little tricky here, not knowing exactly who's going to turn up, but from this far out, Simon, who do you have your eye on?
Yeah, you're right there. Pretty much all the major contenders have got alternative engagements. We've spoken about Jack Hobbs, Highland Reel, and Ulysses in the Prince of Wales, Order of St George's in the Gold Cup as well that he won last year. At this stage, I've taken a punt on a filly called Journey,
sure,
who seems very likely to pitch up here. And she's not just making up the numbers either. She was only fifth to Highland Reel in the Coronation Cup at Epsom the other day, but she needed a run on her first two starts for previous seasons and really ran like she did on this occasion after an 8-month break. She'd run a really fast time when helping to force the pace and winning by 4 lengths at Ascot in the Champions Day filly and mares, which is on good to firm ground, and she's likely to get very similar conditions. On her day, she's up there with the Highland Reels of this world, I think, and this is a race that could possibly be weaker than anticipated at this stage. So I think Journey, trained by John Gosden, is definitely worth a look at a bit of a price. Shorter in the odds, Dartmouth is a very likely runner. He won this last year. But that was a pretty ordinary running, although Highland Reel was second. You may recall that Highland Reel's jockey lost his reins in the straight, and I think Highland Reel might well have won otherwise. Dartmouth has run already this year, won the Yorkshire Cup, but was rather workmanlike that day. I don't think Dartmouth is a horse to be frightened of. He's certainly likely to be there or thereabouts, but he's no superstar, and I'm hopeful the Journey will run one of her better races, certainly better than she did the other week, and I think there's a good reason to believe she will. Marcus, do you have a view in the Hardwicke?
I can't add anything to Simon's expert analysis, although I will mention that Journey was a horse that I did notice last time as being probably her last race was not truly representative, and she's a horse that's definitely capable of better. And I couldn't agree more about Dartmouth. He's to me, he's fully exposed for quite some time, and you know exactly pretty much, even at his best, what you're going to get, and there could well be something that steps up in front of him.
That's a great concept that I think you hear a lot more when English races are discussed than you hear here. The concept of exposed, meaning simply we know how good that horse is. There aren't a lot of reasons to improve. Much more beneficial, generally speaking, to try to find a horse who's going to step up at a price as opposed to taking something exposed at the top of the market. Journey going out in those familiar Strawbridge colors will be easy to spot on the racecourse and a good idea from the team. Any other thoughts on Saturday's card before I get to a couple of quick questions from the audience? Gentlemen, anything else to mention for Saturday?
I have nothing.
The opening race, the Chesham Stakes, is a race that should be well worth watching with the future in mind. It was won by Churchill last year, and his full sister, Clemmy, is prominent in the betting for this year. She's run once, finished third, which I believe Churchill had done before coming here. I'm not sipping her up. We don't know much about her, but it was a very promising debut effort, and is just a chance that Clemmy might be following in her full brother's footsteps.
Another great storyline to follow on Saturday at Royal Ascot. We got an oddly specific question here about a filly named Precious, and if we have any information about where this Irish-bred filly might be turning up at the meeting. Have you heard anything about this one, Simon?
Precious is, he said, racking his brains, finished second behind a horse called Fast, who is running in the Commonwealth Cup. But that was over 6 furlongs. She then stepped up to a mile and won, I believe. Yes, won the Poule d'Essai de Pouliche. She's not actually for sure in anything at Royal Ascot, but I'd imagine she could be one of those who will be pitched up against Winter in the Coronation.
Yeah. That had been the talk. That had been the talk that she was going to do that instead of the French Oak. But I have not seen her name mentioned much recently either, for that matter.
Perhaps a change of plans there, but a story that we can continue to follow. I'll be blogging.
I see her at 16 for the Coronation.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay.
So she's still in the market.
That's definitely a clue.
I thought she ran a pretty decent race last time, but she probably would have some ways to go to get to Winter level, which is not to say that she's not so progressive, and that's not out of the question.
Another one maybe to think about using with this 10% exacta winners bonus. I'll tell you about real quick one more time. You can use Naira Bets to bet exactas throughout the meeting, and when you win, you'll receive a 10% bonus on every race. Very simple. Let's say your exacta pays 200. Naira Bets will add 20 to that. Wagers need to be made via mobile device to qualify, and this promotion is available exclusively to Naira Bets customers. Visit nairabets.com to sign up today. Folks looking for future information about the meeting, I'm going to say timeform.com is probably your best source of information to not only read some coverage of the festival, which of course you'll be finding all over DRF Live from Marcus and Steve Anderson, who's going to be participating in the coverage. I'll be doing some blogging live from Royal Ascot. But in terms of getting your past performances, timeform.com is a place you're going to want to check out. I encourage you to follow both Marcus and Simon on Twitter. Marcus will be tweeting links to his coverage. Simon is going to be doing in-depth looks at the handicaps each day and also an overall review from a sectional timing perspective. I think we have their emails or their Twitter handles up on screen, but really quick, at DRF Hirsch, do you have an underscore in there, Marcus?
No underscores from me, Pete.
At DRF Hirsch, and Simon is at Rolleifile RRR. So make sure to check those guys out. Nick Luck, who joined us at the beginning of the hour, worth following him as well, at Nick Luck. And that is all the time we have for the Naira Bets Royal Ascot preview session. I want to thank all three of our guests immensely for taking the time out of what's always a busy week to join us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pete.
Excellent. I also want to thank everybody for joining us. If you want to see a replay of the show, if you joined us late or you just want to check it out again and make sure you get everything written down properly once the PPs are out, you can do that. drf.com/YouTube is the place to check out the replay. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Thanks again for joining us. You've been watching content produced by drf.com.